I am standing here today in the beautiful St. Helena Catholic Church in Amite, Louisiana. This parish is one of the largest in our diocese. They cover the territory from Amite, Louisiana, northward to the state line to Mississippi, and all of St. Helena Parish as well. And because the Catholic population here is very small, the priest here has done amazing things to educate the people and to bring people into the flock. So join us as we explore the history of St. Helena Catholic Church. We're here in St. Helena Catholic Church in Amite, Louisiana, and my guest today is Father Mark Beard, pastor here. Father Mark, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
This is an amazing place, folks. As a matter of fact, we will definitely get 2 shows just with all the work you've done. But before we get there, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to the priesthood.
I'm a late bloomer. I didn't get ordained until I was 49. Of course, like everybody else, I was born and raised Catholic, but like most people along the way, confirmation is graduation. And so as a result of going to college where you know all the answers, you just don't know all the questions yet, right? And so I start falling further and further away. I've pretty much been most every faith out there. If not, I've definitely studied them from you name it, Methodist, Baptist, Pentecostal, studied the Mormons, I studied Islam. And at the end of the day, Calvin, Zwingli, Martin Luther, Medjugorje is the turning point, right? I go there to disprove it, which is kind of ironic, right? I go there to disprove it, now I'm wearing a dress, so it's the height of irony. And so, but I'm very Marian. It's because Medjugorje and the draw, and because of her, it brought me back into the faith. Now, when I got back from Medjugorje in 2000, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't ready to become Catholic. And my journey is truly the road less traveled, because at one point, I wasn't even convinced that Christ walked the earth. I mean, let's just be candid. When somebody says, do you believe in Jesus Christ, and you hand them a Bible, it's tantamount to you asking me, are you a good guy? And I said, yeah, here's my autobiography, just read it. So in order to believe that Christ even walked the earth, I studied about 5 pagan philosophers who actually spoke to the existence of Christ. That had been Josephus, Pliny the Younger, Suetonius. And as a result of now coming to believe that he did exist, I met ultimately with a Jewish theologian. And that's who got me back into the faith, because until you study Christ as a Jew, and once I did that, and part and parcel, a lot of that goes towards Dr. Petrie, that's what brought me back into the faith. And ultimately, 5 years later, I go into the seminary, and then 5 years later after that, I'm ordained. So.
Amazing story. Now you're pastor here.
Right.
And you've been here now 8 years?
Yeah, I'm finishing up my 8th year. I was 2 years back home in Letcher, Gramercy. And then I came here. It's a different dynamic, right? It's only about 10 to 12% Catholic here. So it's just the catechesis is different. The apologetics is more important. And when we got here, it's like everybody else we face. You know, there's about 20 to 25 churches within a mile of us. We don't have a synagogue or a mosque, but I'm sure over time, like everybody else, that will happen as well. But as a result of it, I get along exceptionally well. Having been many other faiths, I get along really well with a lot of the reverends in town. We have breakfast together and visit. But as like anything else, we've continued to grow. And we grow because I stick very close to the teachings and traditions of our church, because I found over time, St. Thomas was right. We learn through sense experience. And once people start to understand why we do what we do, why do we kneel at Mass? Why do you genuflect? Why do I kiss the altar? Why I wear these vestments? Why do I hold my hands the way I do? Why our church is built like they are? Once you get it, you'll know we're Jews by descent and that we're the true faith.
And you have done that in your tenure here at St. Helena. In just these 8 years, there were 3 courtyards and a pavilion to the Blessed Mother, and many other things that we will showcase during our time with you. But even in this church, there's quite a bit that you've done physically. Just to give you a little background on the parish itself, since we're visiting all the parishes and we're letting our visitors understand, or our audience understand about it. This parish was established in 1868 by Father Scollard, and he was an Irish priest that had actually was sent by the Archbishop of New Orleans to found Our Lady of Mount Carmel, which was at that time in Jackson, not in St. Francisville. And his circuit of the road, or the area that he was to cover, went from the Mississippi River at St. Francisville, and it followed along where Highway 10 is now. So he went through Jackson, Clinton, Port Hudson, Zachary, Greensburg, and then by this time the railroad had come through, and the railroad is really where Amite had its start when the North-South Railroad went as far as Jackson at the time. So he learned to ride the rails, and so he comes here. He's sent by the Archbishop to establish a church here. There was a faith community here because when the railroad came through, people left New Orleans to come here to flee the yellow fever epidemic. So some were temporary homes, others were not. But there were some Catholics in the area and no one to see to their spiritual needs. So Father Scholar follows the orders of the Archbishop and establishes the parish. They say Mass in homes until the church is built, as it is. Generally, when there's a church resident pastor, it gets officially entitled a parish.
Right.
And that was in 1868 for this parish. And over the years, what's different in this region of our diocese is that we didn't always have diocesan priests. Father Schollard was here until about 1890. Well, he and other diocesan priests. He actually went on and founded Ponchatoula, St. Joseph's, and dies there. But other priests, diocesan priests, served until 1890. And at that point, there was a priest shortage, and the Archbishop's contracts with the Benedictines, who were over in St. Tammany Parish, to cover this area. So the Benedictines ministered to the spiritual needs of Tangipahoa from 1890 to about 1912, and then the Dominicans come. First, the Spanish Dominicans, who were here from that point until about 1938, and then the American Dominicans. And these are order priests contracted to come and serve in this area, so it's not under diocesan rule. It's under the rule of their order, but functions in the same capacity as any other parish. So it's a little bit different in Tangipahoa, and then it was in 1991 that it reverted back to being a diocesan-run parish.
That's correct.
And you're the fourth pastor. They've had some others since then, and that's how now you are here.
Yeah.
So that just to give you a brief history of this being actually the second oldest, St. Dominic in Husser was actually established a little before this, but it's never been a parish. It's always been a chapel or mission. So that brings us kind of up to date to where we are here. Right. This building that we're in was in 1940 was destroyed by a hurricane, and this is the building that was built after that.
Right.
And
Right.
Amite is the only parish that I know of in our diocese that's been destroyed. The church has been destroyed by 2 hurricanes.
That's correct.
The Benedictine priest that was here in 1908 was killed as a result of it. And then in 1940, they rebuilt it to this present structure. And you've made some changes and really enhanced what is here.
Right.
So,
What brought that to the table was we had a severe mold problem, and it was growing from our choir loft all the way to the altar, and to a point where we couldn't even worship. And so as a result of we raised the funds that were necessary and made some changes just so that we could get it back and make it functional. And we've been blessed with a beautiful church as a result. And as a result, more and more people come. Right?
it is. As you were saying, it's not a big church, and you were saying you were only 12%.
Yeah, we're only 12%,
Catholic.
10 to 12% Catholic
you
here.
fall in that Bible belt.
Right,
but,
that's correct. That's
but I do
correct.
know that there's a strong Sicilian presence here
Yeah,
that
that is
came
true.
at the turn of the century when the Italian immigrants were coming in. So your parish is one of those that does St. Joseph altars and
That's correct.
what other type
Well,
ministries?
we have quite a few ministries in that, and it's grown, right? As more people get involved, there's more ministries. Like everybody else, we have St. Vincent de Paul, we have the Catholic Daughters, we have the KCs, but we also have a very large Spanish contingent. We're probably the largest Spanish contingent outside of Baton Rouge.
Wow.
We have Mass every Sunday, and we have a priest that rotates with me. And all kidding aside, he's the one they prefer because otherwise they get my version of Spanish. So as a result of it, we feed every night afterwards. So about 150 to 200 people come to Mass, so it's quite well attended. And as a result, it's a wonderful blessing. But as a result, more and more people. So we have the Spanish First Communion. We have for our students as well, and we have confirmation. And so the sacraments kind of run a dual road, but it's been a wonderful blessing for us. Everybody's been involved. It's very family driven and very vested. So it's a wonderful blessing for us.
In this beautiful church and in this parish, there are a lot of things that you do to help bring the people in, to have them understand the Mass more, and tell us some of those things too.
Well, it's important as Catholics that we understand our heritage, right? We talked about it many times about we're Jews by descent. But in our church is full of traditions. We don't speak to them probably as well as we should. I'm talking as in general as in the priesthood. But what brought me back to the church was realizing how much of our traditions are tied to our Jewish heritage, but more importantly, to our Catholic faith. So, for example, you'll notice that in our church, each of the pews has the symbol of St. Helena, which is we have the crown of thorns encircling 3 wooden nails, the nails of Christ, because she's the one that found the crown of thorns. She's the one that found the nails. She's the one that found the crucifix, the INRI, right? So she is very much, she's probably a reliquary in and of herself. I know everybody in Rome wants to see St. Peter's and Mary Magdalene, Mary de Major, St. Paul's, but truly the one that has all the relics is Santa Croce, the Church of the Cross, St. Helena. But you'll notice too that when you look at the backdrop of our church, you'll notice that we tied a lot of the Old Testament. We tied the prophet Ezekiel, which is where we get the gospel writers from. And what Ezekiel was trying to say in the Old Testament as a devout Jew, that when the Messiah comes, he's going to come in these 4 images: a man, a lion, a bull, and an eagle. Those 4 images will tie to him. He will come as a man, obviously Matthew's gospel. He'll come as a priest, which is a bull, which is Judah. As a bull. He comes from the tribe of Judah, which is the lion. He'll come from the heavens like an eagle in St. John. So when you see those 4 images, so that's why you see them on the backdrop of our church, along with the Lamb, not to mention the Holy Spirit and God the Father. And so you'll notice that there are 7 steps up to our tabernacle. Those are the 7 sacraments. You'll notice that we have a kneeler so that you could have the option of receiving and kneeling. In Scripture, every time somebody recognized Christ for who he is, from the lepers, from the people that were cured of blindness, they made 1 of 3 gestures. They either knelt, bowed, or lay prostrate. Those all that knew Christ for who he was, less the devil. The point being is the reason you and I kneel at Mass is because we believe he's physically present. So why wouldn't you have the option at least to kneel to receive him? And what I found is about 95% of our congregation does. 95% of those people take it on the tongue. Our children love it because now they understand the tradition. It's a reverence. It's not a conservative liberal issue. It's a reverence issue. And as a result of it, they're starting, because in a Protestant area, it's very common when I have weddings or funerals to find the host in music books and hymnals stuck in the pew, because they make no proclamation one way or another. Even though I ask them to come forward with their hands or their heart, just as I would have done when I was their faith. And so, but what it does, it gives people the option. They can surely still take it standing. They can take it in their hand. It's already been established. But the reason I like it is I like the traditions. You know, we have 6 candles by the tabernacle. The reason is because there's 6 jars at the wedding to Cana. And the good Lord is making a proclamation and making a statement that 7, according to the Jews, is the most complete number of the world. 7 days of creation, the 7 years to build the temple. He says, my hour is not yet come. He's the 7th candle. He's the light of the world. That's why he's telling his Blessed Mother. That's why there are 6 jars. Now, granted, there's 6 jars, 30 gallons each of wine. That's 180 gallons of wine. Renee, it's a Catholic wedding. It's just 2,000 years ago. The point being is that people are starting to understand more and more. That's why we have 6 candlesticks around it. We have 2 candlesticks on the altar, one because he's human and divine. We have 2 in the ambo because of the Old Testament and the New. Everything that you'll see in our church, even from our roof, as you'll notice, back in the day, the churches were made where the ribs of the church were exposed, the beams. And the reason they did that is because the vast majority of the time that Christ gets into a boat in Scripture, it's Peter's boat. The church is often referred to as Peter's bark. So if you notice when you look up at eyes, it's an inverted hull of a ship, right? Inverted hull of Peter's boat. So everything that you see here, you'll see that we have the ways of the cross. We do the prayer to St. Michael at the end of every Mass. We have a beautiful statue of St. Helena because it's her namesake. We do things probably in a little different manner in that throughout the Mass, you'll hear me explain prior to the reading of the Old Testament. I'll explain why that prophet is speaking and why that testament ties to the New. I'll explain why we're doing St. Paul's reading, so it's just not so foreign to you. And then at the end of every Mass, I'll ultimately end up taking the questions from the top. Every parishioner writes questions, and I take the top 10. And before Mass closes, I'll take the top 2 or 3 and answer them on why we do what we do, right? So that people have a greater understanding of our faith.
That's amazing. One of the things that you had meant, we had talked earlier, that 12%,
Right.
when you wanted to establish adoration here in the church, you were not able to, so you made
That's
a
correct.
room.
That's correct.
You made a room
Right.
for prayer that is totally amazing. You just don't think of it because it's not done anywhere else. And walking into that room, you feel that
You
sense
feel
of
His presence.
peace.
There's an
You
essence
feel
there.
that.
There
Oh
is.
yes, no doubt about it.
We weren't big enough to do adoration. We didn't have the chapel per se. We surely couldn't do it 24 hours. And so as a result of it, we ran across a reposed Christ. After Christ had been crucified and His body's been clean, He's laying on the slab. It had some broken pieces and parts, but I was blessed to have some great talent with me that put it back together with two beautiful angels that are holding the instruments of the crucifixion, the hammer, the nails, the crown of thorns. And what we did is we put a 24-hour swipe card, like you do at a hotel room, on that door to allow people to come in. And it became so popular, they ended up having to do swipe cards on all the doors of the church. Now it's grown that we have adoration, that all of our parishioners have swipe cards so they can come in 24/7. Because let's be honest, Renee, sometimes problems don't end at 5 o'clock. They start
right.
at 5 o'clock, and you'd like to go where you could sit quietly. The lights are always on, and different lights are lit up throughout the course of the night. The gates allow you to come in and close behind you for security issues, so you can go to the Garden of Gethsemane. You could sit out by the fountains and the ways of the Eucharist. You could sit in St. Peter's courtyard, or you can come here in church. The chant will be playing throughout the course of the night. I just want people to have that opportunity to be close to it.
Father, you were talking about earlier in the last little segment before we went to break, you mentioned the different courtyards that exist here.
Right.
And folks, we will be covering those in detail, and we'll do that in a whole nother show following this one. But
Right.
they didn't, it's hard to understand when we're just shooting the word of this courtyard or that courtyard. So you will learn about all of the courtyards that
Yeah, great.
exist here. But also, we have we had the Jesus room, the
repose room,
the prayer room. Is that what it's called, the rosary room? My apologies. But there is something very special here that is in the back of the church, and it's a reliquary. And folks, what that is it's relics from saints, from places. It's something, there's different levels. You
Right,
probably
that's
can
correct.
explain that better.
As a church, you're lucky if you have a handful of relics, because they're very hard to come by, and understandably so. We've been blessed. Several years ago, a friend of mine who helps with decommissioning churches was in Europe when they decommissioned a convent, and as a result of it, they had about 150 relics, all of them stamped with the appropriate Latin verbiage. And for those of us that may not be familiar with it, on the back of every reliquary, there's usually a stamp, and it's usually a wax seal made by a bishop or cardinal or the Holy Father himself, along with verification that the relic is indeed true. So to be able to run across 150 relics, all stamped and with the backing, is just nothing short of miraculous. So when I got the phone call that they were closing the convent, it took up on a life of its own, right? Because otherwise, these relics are going to go public, whether you want to choose eBay or whatever. So a friend of mine stepped up as a benefactor and did what he needed to do to procure them, and then donated them to the church. We took about a year to build a reliquary, because to build 150 relics, oftentimes you get in churches, you can't get close enough to see the relic, and which kind of takes away from the reason you have it, right? We live off the saints, right? Our church is predicated on that. So we have 150 or so relics, and they include the crucifixion scene, which would be the cross of Christ. It would have part of the sponge, part of the whipping tip, the spear tip as well. It would have part of the whipping post. It would have a little bit of the crown of thorns. Now we also have the 12 apostles, that of John the Baptist. We have the 4 gospel writers. We have about 6 or 7 of the popes, several church fathers. We also have the veil of the Blessed Mother, along with the good thief, and also about 2 or 3 dozen martyrs. And on one side, on the other side of the reliquary, is the ways of the cross and each of the ground that came from the specific area where he fell. So when you come, there's a little pamphlet that you look at. If you want to locate your saint, then you look for the number, and then you look up on the screen. It's probably 5 foot by 10 foot. It's a massive reliquary that you can walk right up to.
And the thing about it, you were telling me, it's so rare to have this type of collection. These would have been scattered had they gone up for sale privately and not been kept together as a whole, correct?
That's correct.
But just the ones pertaining to the crucifix is so rare to have the ones that you've got. This is something that doesn't exist.
Right, you're lucky, right? Most churches,
Right
and you feel fortunate, and rightfully so, that you got part of the crucifixion, or you have part of the cross, or maybe the cross of the good thief. But when you have that many pieces in one setting,
place.
and with the stamp and the appropriate backing, it just, you'd be blessed beyond belief just to have that. So to have all the ancillary things of the apostles and the gospel writers and the Blessed Mother and Lazarus and the good thief and the saints, this was manna from heaven for us. So we just didn't want to put it in any reliquary.
Anywhere.
And so it took about 1.5 years to get it built, so that people could have at least access to get up to see it.
And you have an artist that does these things for you, correct? The artist that built this reliquary, designed it, is
Correct.
also the same one that's done the artistry for you in some of these courtyards and in some of the gardens that we'll be
Right.
showcasing, correct?
You know, one of the challenges for churches today is the expense of the maintenance, but moreover, to hold on to their traditions, especially like stained glass. It's 3 or 4 times the cost of what it would be, and there's a group out of Texas called Stained Glass Incorporated. Our paths crossed because Father Michael Champagne in Lafayette at Jesus Christ Crucified and I have been blessed to be good friends for a while. His brother-in-law is the one that started this, and he is the one that helped us with the ways of the Eucharist. He's helped us with some of the things in our cupola, and he's also the one that helped us ultimately design the reliquary.
Father, when you were talking on the left side of the church where the repository room, where Christ is laying sideways, laying there, when you walk in the door, there is another piece of art on the opposite wall.
That's correct.
And it is, it's like a relief, 3D relief of the crucifixion.
Fiction, correct.
Tell us a little bit about that, because it's a beautiful, beautiful
It's
image.
something that's really unique. It's probably a 8 by 10 replica of the crucifixion, and yet it's not a painting, it's 3D. So if you look,
8 by 10, you're talking about feet.
yes,
It's not
it's
8 by 10.
no, it's pretty substantial. We put it near the repose room so that people can understand the correlation. And when you look at it, it's very unique. And there's several things in it that I think people need to draw their attention to. For example, the mountain was called the Mountain of Golgotha, which is the mountain of the skull. The skull they're talking about is Adam's skull. And the tradition in the church, since Christ is the new Adam, exactly where they inserted the wood would have been on top of Adam's skull. Hence why a lot of times in the crucifixion scenes you see a little skull, right?
The base.
Right, the base. That would have been Adam's skull, him being the new Adam. Oftentimes, too, you'll see 3 people in the scene, right? There'll be St. John. There'll be his Blessed Mother to his right, St. John to the left, and Mary Magdalene at the foot. Now, oftentimes, not a lot, but you will see it happen where sometimes the Blessed Mother will be without her veil. And that is true. It's not so much in this rendition, but it is a tradition of our church that the good Lord would have been crucified without any covering. And she gave her veil as means of covering. That's why sometimes in the scenes you'll notice that she will not have her veil. In this particular case, she does have it. Also, if you look at his hands, in particular his right hand, you'll notice that the crucifixion has him holding his hand in like this capacity. And that sign is a sign of a Trinity, a triune God. The 2 fingers at the bottom were the Old and the New Testament. And so that's how you and I would have made the sign of the cross back in the day. He actually holds his hands that way in the crucifixion. This is why a lot of priests hold their hands in such a capacity during Mass. It's a beautiful rendition. And there's candles in front of it because a lot of people have a devotion to the crucifixion scene. It's absolutely beautiful.
It is beautiful and something different that we don't see in other parishes. There's also another tradition that you do here that you were telling me about on break, and that it's reflective of something that you knew someone or heard about up north.
Right.
That developed here. So tell us that story,
Yeah.
because it was very fascinating.
One of the things I couldn't understand is how do we grow when we're only 10 or 12% Catholics? And the bishop up in Lincoln, Nebraska, obviously has blazed a new path. And he's obviously in the Bible Belt. But what he's done is he brought in cloistered nuns. And as a result of such, they are dedicated to prayer, not just for himself, but for his priest, his seminarians, as well as the parishioners. It is probably one of the fastest growing dioceses in the United States. I believe they have their own convents, they have their own seminary. They are growing leaps and bounds. And he said what did it is that people were dedicated to prayer. There was a group dedicated to prayer for the parish. So we borrowed that idea. We purchased the statue of the Blessed Mother, holding Christ on her lap. And we asked a family to take it home for 1 week to pray a rosary at night in front of the statue, just as a sense of focus, because we don't worship clay and mortar, but a sense of focus. And as a result, you pray a rosary at night for 7 days, and next Sunday you bring it to the next family. Well, what happened is so many families got in line, about 20 or 25, we decided that we need to get another statue. So we went from 1 statue to 2, then ultimately to 4, then to 8. Well, now we have 12. We have 12 statues of the Blessed Mother that go out every Sunday. 12 rosaries are prayed every night for our families, as a family of St. Helena, for our families at home, for our families that have in Heaven's Hospital, purgatory, if you will, and also those that have fallen away in our families from our faith. And this has been going on almost 2 years now. And so when you come to Mass, you're going to see 12 statues of the Blessed Mother, because our church is Mother Church. Our church is female because the Blessed Mother is female. She's the new tabernacle. And so as a result of it, people wanted these statues in their home. And because they wanted statues in their home, we were buying statues to supply, and that's what started our gift shop. Yeah.
And they do have an amazing gift shop that we will showcase as well. But you have to understand here, because yet you haven't seen all that there is to see here. They do come on tour buses here.
That's correct.
You get 2 or 3 big tours per month, as
right.
well as just groups of 3 and 4 daily to go through all the courtyards and the gardens that you have here at St. Helena.
Right.
So the gift shop is all part of this. And this is a huge complex that you have developed just in your tenure here in order to, one, bring back the flock, but also to aid in the support and the growth of Catholics in this area. So I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you.
But before I do that, I've got to ask, because every time we go to a break, he tells me something I haven't covered. So anything else before we close?
Well, first of all, I got a great staff. And the reason that we're able to function is we have about 8 ladies in the office that they make it work, because I'm always out and about. Remember, we're one of the largest land masses in our diocese.
You are. Second largest, I think.
Right. We have 3 hospitals, 3 nursing homes, and we had 2 other mission churches that I was tied to as well. So in order for us to accomplish what we needed to do, we got to have people that share the vision. So having them with me is what makes it work, because of all the different ministry groups that we have. And as a result of it, as more people come, more people get fed. So not only do we have 2 or 3 tour groups that come through on the Hotard and Calco buses, we also have what we call the drive-bys, people that just want to come visit, which is great. But we also do half-day and day retreats. We do it for teachers. We do it for students. We do it for high schools, grammar schools. So you can do it half-day or day retreats. I speak at one or some, or if you bring your own speaker, you're welcome to do that too.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. So, see, there's ideas for you teachers out there, for your children, for, field trips even.
Right. Just
That's
come
great.
see. Right.
But thank you. It is amazing, the things that are here. You need to come visit and see it all, because we can't begin to cover it on film. Thank you, and join us again for another episode of Roots of Faith.